there were some like dorks with calculators who got the math wrong and believe that we can, govern by convincing college educated Republicans to vote with
Hey, okay,
Democrats
okay,
and
calm
just sort
down
of
now. Now,
sorry,
sorry.
sorry, sorry, Tim. I
Okay.
know.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark's Sunday Next Level podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. I'm here today with Congresswoman Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, who's coming at us live from Washington with our most beautiful backdrop I think we've had on the show so far. Congresswoman, I want to acknowledge my biases up top here, okay? So you beat Joe Kent, the most noxious GOP F boy that ran for Congress last year in a pretty competitive category. That hate that dude, and you're kind of like a mavericky Democrat, so you're already kind of tickling a couple of my pleasure centers here. So anyway, welcome to the podcast. Hopefully we'll be good. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Glad to
It
meet.
seems you
Yeah, it was a
It
dogfight.
seems like you said in our little green room there. You said you were at the Timber. You were competing at the Timber Festival this weekend. Where are you? Tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah. So I live in rural Skamania County, and it's a big timber county, or it was, and we are in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, and so we compete every year in the Timber Carnival.
What does that competition
Um,
entail?
I kind of well, so there's like I think there's like 10 events, 2 days, and I competed in four of them on Friday. And I kind of choked on the axe throwing this year, which I'm super annoyed by. But I got first place in the obstacle pole, which would be like run up a 20-degree pole, and um, the guys start a chainsaw and like cut the end off. Women tie a ribbon around it, and then choker setter, I got third place. Um, and then yeah, I bombed in axe throwing, which was too bad,
Okay, so
but
this is where I want
it
to
was
start.
fun.
I want to understand kind of whence you came. So I'm a gay suburban boy who wouldn't even. I don't think I could even throw an axe. I don't know what would happen if I would endanger myself if I picked up an axe. I think so. Like how did you tell me about like in your childhood? Were you interested in power tools? Like how did you end up becoming a auto repair shop owner living out in the sticks in axe throwing competitions?
Well, so my mom's side is all from Washington State since before it was a state, and they're all loggers. Or, they're many, many loggers, um, and I mean, I had a lot of respect for that world and the stories, and I love, love being outside. I love like physical work, and I when I met my husband, I was a bike mechanic. I was running a little like bike co-op at my college, and he
Doing
was an auto
fixies?
mechanic. He was a mobile mechanic. Yeah, yeah. Oh my God, so many fixies in that era. Yes. And like the secret is that most bike mechanics actually want to be auto mechanics. The carburetors are like super cool. So I started following him around and eventually got him to marry me. And we moved out to Skamania County, um, built our house out here. And I heard about the axe throwing, I heard about the timber carnival, and I was like, oh my God. And my uncle gave me one of his axes. I knew he competed. Uh, he they do this thing where, like, you go up a pole climbing to set the line to drag.
Okay.
Anyways, so that he had done that, and so I knew about it from him, and um, yeah, that's how I got into it. But it's fun. It's fun stuff, I think. And listen, like I know this sounds like people are like whatever, but I think that one of the things that's going on under the rock of American culture is that there's this mass homogenization and this real loss of like place-based politics and things that actually like matter, that like that stuff matters on a like a heart level, I think, when we lose a connection to the specific things going on in our communities and everything becomes nationalized. Like that is when like that homogenization allows for really the ugliest parts of political polarization and homogenization. And I think it's our duty to fight that and to turn back to a place-based politics.
Yeah, that kind of ties into where I wanted to go next, which was so, I mean, the Democrats, have struggled so much in these types of communities. I maybe a little less in Washington, but then in other places. I just went to Louisiana, obviously deeply struggling here. But John Bell Edwards is the governor here who kind of has had success and has cut against that. Like when you think about why the party has struggled in kind of rural areas and among working class folks and working people. Do you think that that is cultural, policy, both? Like, how would you kind of grade what the issue is and how maybe the party could do better?
Yeah, I think that there were some like dorks with calculators who got the math wrong and believe that we can, govern by convincing college educated Republicans to vote with
Hey, okay,
Democrats
okay,
and
calm
just sort
down
of
now. Now,
sorry, Tim. I
okay.
know.
Yeah,
No,
they picked
well,
up ones
and
of us.
and
I mean,
just
there
sort
are
of
dozens of us out there that you picked up, Congresswoman. Anyway, continue.
but no, but so they just sort of washed their hands and said like, well, we don't need, blue collar working class people. We don't need rural America anymore. And I think that A, the math is wrong on that, and I think B, um, that is like when you narrow your focus that way and just say like, oh well, you're not smart enough to get what we're doing. Like actually, I think the party is not smart enough to get what we're doing. Like there is a real there's a real wisdom I think in rural communities and in blue collar communities and to just say like, oh, you know what, we don't need to understand that anymore. Like, and walk away is a real it's a real impoverishment of the values of the Democratic Party. And I think that um, a lot of it in Washington State stems back to uh, timber policy, forest policy, where so my mom's from Forks, Washington, which is the epicenter of the spotted owl fiasco. And they like kind of they like shut down the timber industry in a lot of woods uh, over an owl that has never is still struggling today. Like today they pay people to go out with like potato guns and like beanbag barred owls to try and protect spotted owls. Like it continues to be just a fiasco, and um,
I
you
mean,
know,
nothing against the spotted
um,
owl, but you mean it's just a prioritization balance here. Nothing against-
yeah, and and it's like I feel like a lot of rural people we sense like we're the first ones to pay for things all the time, and whether it's jobs or school quality or infrastructure or whatever it is, it feels like you know um, people you know a lot of folks think like, well, if you were smart you would have like moved to the city
right.
and gotten a better
There's a
job.
condescending element to it. Um, I
Oh,
so
for
I,
sure.
so here's my
Yeah.
like one of my big pet peeves with my former party, the Republicans, now is that like they've made this pivot to performatively act like they care about what the forgotten man, etc., in rural America, but like the substance hasn't backed it up at all, right? I mean, it probably wouldn't be the party for me if they went more populist economically and on immigration and on foreign, and engaged in a more direct way. I mean, Trump put Kellyanne Conway in charge of his opioid commission, and it's just all of this it's just bullshit, and like they don't actually care about these people. It's pretend, right? It's a cultural pose, but in a lot of ways they've let these folks down. So that should be an opportunity for the Democrats, but it doesn't seem like they're taking it. And so I just
Yeah.
like, how could the Democrats kind of like
Yeah.
fill that void that I think that the
Oh,
Republicans are leaving?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I'm on the agriculture committee, and so when I'm home, I'm doing a lot of farm bill listening tours and farm
Yeah,
tours and things like that. And one of the things that comes up over and over is like people, these producers and farmers are not talking about kicking people off food stamps. They're talking about market consolidation as what's killing the family farm. It's not that culture war bullshit. It is listen, like there are two corporations that will I can contract with to grow chickens
sure.
or and they're both going to crush me from either side
Right.
in a vice. And my kids don't want to take over the farm because they see what it looks like to be a player in a monopolistic uh, economy, and or so I think that we should certainly be leading on some of these like fundamentally antitrust issues, like right to repair is a really big deal. It's one of the reasons that compelled me to run for office. So, like you said, I own an auto repair shop.
Explain right to
And
repair.
so
I was going to ask you
we're
about
an
that, but just
independent.
since you mentioned it, explain what
Yeah,
that is.
yeah, yeah. So, well, so on background, like we own an independent shop, which is the dying breed. It means we're not affiliated with a dealership or a manufacturer. Like we work on anything. It's not that these cars aren't under warranty. They're like from the 90s.
You're doing those van
And right to
remodels
repair
that
the
like guys
Genesis.
that want to move out to the woods and like live out of their van, like you're doing those.
We see actually we do see a lot of we see a lot of those kinds, but we also see like the Gambler
Oh, right.
500s
Yeah.
of the world. Um, uh, but the right to repair sort of started with tractors. John Deere was one of the worst. They started putting these chips on their tractors, and only the dealerships could have the key to unlock that, you know, digital, to get into the motor. And farmers had all some unknowingly signed terms of service contracts that said you can only get them fixed at the dealership. Well, there's like not enough dealerships ever to service, and all of this 1 year make and model of tractor all basically glitched at the same time. It was haying season. There weren't enough dealerships to see and repair all of these glitches, and because they were locked out, farmers couldn't do it themselves. You have a very narrow window to cut hay when it actually has nutritive value for stock. It's when the seed head is formed but hasn't fallen off the stalk yet. And so people imagine being like millions of dollars in debt. You've got a $250,000 piece of
Yeah.
equipment sitting in the yard as yard art now, and you can't work on it because some asshole with an MBA like locked you out of it. And so half of them come out with like a pitchfork and demand right to repair. The other half, many of them actually go to Eastern Europe to get their tractors hacked. And there's a lot of national security risk to these right to repair issues, actually, because that's
And
the
there's some of this in the
alternative.
military. You had an amendment
Um,
to the NDAA that was on this too.
yeah,
Our military guys
yes.
can't even
How
fix our shit in the
crazy
field.
is
Is
that?
that really true?
Yes, yes. They have to get a technician to come out with their scan tool. Like it's crazy. With the purchasing power of the U.S. military, we are still vulnerable in this way. It is crazy to me. And so it's gone way too far, and we're really at this fulcrum point where we have to start, you know, um, assuring our right to fix our own stuff. And it's not just about like the pocketbook issue or the morality of it. It is again, it's one of those cultural things of like we are a nation that really believes in DIY. Like other countries aren't like this. My husband's German extraction. Like people don't like in Germany, people don't like paint their own walls or like fix their own plumbing. Like America is actually pretty unique and where we believe like, oh, people should all, you should be able to do all this stuff. That's our cultural heritage, and it's being eviscerated by, these terms of service and these monopolistic behaviors. And so, I mean, I just believe I believe in capitalism. Like I believe that you should be able to take your truck to get it fixed anywhere you
Yeah.
want. And it's one of the most pragmatic ways that you can support the trades and support rural communities is by supporting right to repair legislation. And
I mean,
and
this is just tickling my
you know,
former Republican
it,
pickle. I know you don't want to recruit us over, but that one, that one aligns. I think it aligns working class Democrats and people that have the whatever independent American streak, that libertarian streak. I want to ask though, it's interesting hearing you talk about that. It's just like you're so you have a depth of knowledge that comes from the experience, right, that you're bringing to the table. And I was reading, I got sent this memo by a Democratic staffer, Morgan Searcy, who had worked in politics, and she interviewed a bunch of staffers, and was like, "What's wrong with the Democratic campaigns?" And one of the things that they focus on, which is a fair point, is that like Democrats staff still doesn't reflect their coalition, and that like there were cases where maybe there's a mid-level black staffer that like flagged why an ad that the campaign wanted to do was actually going to be kind of offensive in the black community, and that the kind of leadership didn't understand it. And I think that's totally probably right and legit that the Democratic kind of side should be making sure that they reflect America. They're obviously doing better than Republicans at that. But like not mentioned in that memo ever is we should recruit more working class people. We should recruit more people from rural America. We should
Uh-huh.
recruit more people
Uh-huh.
that go to church twice a
Uh-huh.
week, right? What do you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you expressed that internally? Like, what's your take on that? All that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems is like there's a lot of lip service for egalitarianism, but actually in the Beltway, it is this super snobby, like hyper credentialed, and it just becomes like groupthink of who's qualified and who's smart. And people never consider, well, actually maybe somebody with a reading disability is actually really brilliant in many other ways that you don't have the intelligence to understand. But so we, I think on both sides, everybody, their concept of what makes a good candidate, it's like somebody with a JD and a trust fund and a built-in donor network and
And
no
talking
kids.
points, and good at
And
talking
it's like,
points.
yes, yeah, good at
Yeah.
dodging questions. Um, and it's like I think people are tired of that. I think people want a Congress that like looks like America. Um, and to your point, like, yeah, like there is, um, there's the, often in DC, there's a real homogeneity to the kinds of people that want to be in DC. And so, like, to me, like, when I'm trying to recruit staff, like, I want people that don't really want to be in DC, that like, that's not
Yeah.
their life, they haven't been trying to do it since they were 7,
Yeah, that's great.
that have experience in the trades or didn't go to college or,
Yeah, diversity is
I
important,
have a
but like
bipartisan
having
staff.
I have a bunch of races and everybody went to Princeton, like is still limiting the
Yeah.
diversity element. You have a
Yeah.
bipartisan staff. You've
Can,
hired
yeah.
Republicans.
Yeah. I do. Yeah, I have a bipartisan staff. I have a staff, and not everyone on my staff went to college at all. I have a broad range. And I think that's really important. Like if you are right about something, like you should be right like in any context. Like you don't need to have an echo chamber around you. And I think it actually is like leads to a lot of narrow-mindedness to not have dissent in your own office.
So this is going to provide more fodder for something that I wanted to ask you about. There was a Slate article this week. A woman, a Democratic activist named Melissa
Mm.
Byrne. She said about you, she's a Sinema wannabe. How many votes has she taken that Joe Kent wouldn't have taken? So I want to give you a chance to talk about both sides of that question. How do you respond to being compared to Kyrsten Sinema, and how many votes have you taken that Joe Kent wouldn't have taken? Joe Kent's a white nationalist, so I would assume quite a few, but I'll let you answer it.
Yeah, well, is unhinged too strong of language? I mean, I think like I have voted with my party 8 out of 10 times. I have I believe I've always 10 out of 10 times I have voted with my district, and that's my job. It is not to be a cheerleader for ideology. It's to reflect my district. And what they got so mad about was they got really pissed about my student loan vote. Um, I don't know where this Melissa person lives,
Brooklyn.
but you know, yeah, it's not Skamania County, and um, the state or that would have benefited the most from student debt forgiveness was actually Washington D.C. because everyone's young there and everyone's got multiple degrees. Washington State, my state, was number 46 on beneficiaries, and in my district, I think it's 1 out of 4 1 out of 4 people in my district has a college degree. Like, I have Seattle and Washington State, right? So my district was just on the very tail end of who would have benefited. And like, I was just spending a bunch of time with paraeducators from rural schools. Like, we don't have air conditioning in many of our rural schools. And, like, you've got kids trying to learn in a classroom that's 90 degrees inside, and somebody believes that we should be spending $600 billion on forgiving, um, you know, post secondary and, graduate degree debt. Like, I,
Okay.
I just have I have my special guest here is just
Oh, I was like, is it going to
uh,
be a chicken? No, it's
arrived.
Hey, buddy. What's going on? My
Yeah.
5-year-old has made a
Yeah,
couple
I don't
appearances
know.
on this podcast, so it's all good. What's his name? I've
Yeah.
only seen the top of his head.
This is
Cito.
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 Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to ask you about student loans, but just on the sit with it. I mean, is there somebody that you look at and you're like, man, they're doing a really great job in Congress? Like somebody that you are trying to model yourself after, or
Uh, I I I didn't come to Congress because I'm like I try to model myself after politicians, like that's not who you know, when I'm, you know,
is there somebody you've really got along with?
the people that I like, oh yeah, for sure. And so I am now co-chairing the Blue Dogs with Jared Golden and Mary Peltola, who also they are the only Democrats that hold seats that are more
Yeah,
Trumpy than mine. And Jared's been doing it since
yeah,
18 since 2018, and so they're from rural communities. They're also from like we are all from fishing and timber communities. So um, it's good to have people that are um, that know how to run a chainsaw and like know what it means to try to find daycare in a rural community and like all of those things.
yeah. Obviously, the daycare issue is happening live here.
Yeah.
I hear that it's not cheap. We just moved from Oakland to New Orleans, and yeah, the childcare thing is definitely real. I wanted so just really quick back to the student loan issue, really,
Okay.
because
Okay, go,
I'm everything that you said, I'm totally in line with, and I disagreed with the Biden executive order, and but I do think that college has gotten insanely expensive, and there are certain jobs, also
oh my
important
God,
jobs,
yes.
nurses, teachers, prosecutors and defenders, public serv like they need to go post secondary degrees, and then their salaries can't afford them, right? So like, what is there another thing that you think that we should be doing in that space that's different from what you voted against?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the big story that no one's talking about. Thank you for pointing that out. That uh, since I was born in 1988, can you push him on the swing? That'll help. Um, uh, uh, I was born in 1988, and since I was born, tuition has increased 481%, which is crazy. If you look at something like, I think it's something like 4% of people enroll or employed in higher ed are graphic designers. Only 33% of people working in higher ed are actually educators. Like there's been so much administrative bloat, so much bloat in terms of recruitment and advertising and just fundraising, like all of these things. Um, and it's been really frustrating to feel like somehow the narrative went from like, how do we make college affordable and demand accountability for, you know, to, oh, like, let's just write a blank check and hope the problem goes away for this discrete set of people.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want party favors for discrete, you know, age ranges. I want systemic reform of education. And, um, I think that um, there are ways that it could have been structured to be actually like progressive, but the
It's
way that Biden wrote that bill, it was a regressive
some people throw out, and I think Biden's
policy.
for this too. Like, it's I might have the number on, but something like there's a 5% of your salary cap that you have to pay back, right? Right. It's you model it so it's you don't just get it wiped away. But if you're a teacher and you're only making 40 grand a year, then you only have to pay 5% of that, right? Like there are other ways to kind of model it, but I don't. Is there anything in particular that you've heard about, or just
Yeah, I mean, I think so income based,
yeah,
that's one thing. Actually, I just heard about a program in Korea that I thought was super I mean, whatever, this is kind of, but so in Korea, like say that there are 100 there's spots for 100 graphic designers. Um, when they graduate, when those 100 people graduate, the next round, like if only 85 of them get uh, a job as a graphic designer in that first year after graduating, the next class entering is limited to
yeah,
85, so that there's more of like a market. It when you're investing resources that like people aren't being misled that there's all
Right.
these jobs out there when there aren't. And that's one of the things that there's just a huge lack of transparency and accountability in, like, what is it actually going to, like, what is an interest rate? What does compounding interest do to what does the job market look like? What are your chances of actually graduating? So I think, like, more transparency, more accountability for institutions that are taking federal dollars is really
I
necessary.
wanted to ask you, we're running out of time. The big Tommy Tuberville, the abortion issue. There's been a lot of discussion around this. I know
Yeah.
you ran as a pro-choice candidate. I think another thing that some people on the left were mad at you about was kind of this vote, about the broader military budget, because it included this Republican fix where it's like, no, the military shouldn't pay for people to travel to abortion, to have access to abortion. Like what is your just take on that whole controversy, both with the Tommy Tuberville and kind of what's in the bill?
Yeah, I mean, um, so the way that bill, the NDAA, came to the floor is like there's the bill text, and then all these, like, crazy amendments that came in, these, like,
Sure.
very toxic, like Chip Roy, and I voted against every one of the crazy amendments. But ultimately, we know, like, the legislative process is that it's going to the Senate, where it's going to get cleaned up, and we're going to get a rational, uh, defense bill back. And so, um, I ultimately felt like it's a mistake to not fund our military, and to like, this posture of, like, we're you know we're going to be torn apart and not fund our military and give the troops the raise that they deserve. So, ultimately, I, expect that we'll get a cleaned up version back from the Senate. And I look forward to voting on that. And, like Sinema and Tuberville talking about some kind of whatever, we know that Biden's never going to sign a bill that actually restricts abortion access like that. And so it's just not fact based
Yeah.
thinking.
And it's
Um,
and
I think it's
just the
pandering.
policy on the merits. It's just insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's terrible. I mean, yeah.
I love this.
Yeah.
We had Abigail Spanberg on a couple months ago, and she was citing a positive thing with Chip Roy, and like now you're slagging him. So I'm like, Chip Roy's just catching strays on this podcast all the time. Okay, you've got your child. We do a rapid fire at the end. 2 rapid fires. I'm gonna let you get back to parenting. All right, are you ready? The first one everybody gets something that you've changed your mind about as a grown up.
Mm. Well, I didn't think I was going to join any ideological caucuses, and then I found this opportunity and did, and I've really enjoyed the Blue Dogs, and what it's becoming, which I think is a very powerful. So that's one thing, but 6 months in, it's more about, like, learning more than necessarily, like, changing opinions on
Yeah,
fundamentals.
tell Jared to come hang out. I'm also interested in the stuff you guys are doing. All
Oh
right, the
yeah.
final one on the website for Dean's Car Care. It says preventative maintenance is sexy, and so I'd like to close by asking, what is the sexiest type of maintenance that you can do on a car?
Changing your oil. I don't know who needs to hear this, but change your oil.
Yes,
Tim,
that's
is it
me.
you?
Change.
Like, I can't tell you how many new cars I've seen blown up because people don't change their oil. Check your oil regularly.
So I lost connection with Congressman Gluesenkamp Perez right as I was being mocked for my inability to change oil or change a tire. I'm gonna say maybe that was on purpose. Maybe it was an accident. We'll never really know. I'm so appreciative, though, that she came on the pod. Find her super interesting. And we'll see you on Wednesday for the next level with me and JVL and Sarah. And then in 2 Sundays for our next special guest. Peace.